You know the drill. You push down some of your negative thoughts and negative feelings. You tell yourself to man up. She'll be right, and just keep getting on with your life, and you find all sorts of things to do to distract you. But here's the thing, bottling your emotions will not make you stronger. It will make you more confused and more frustrated, and you'll wonder why. And you're disconnecting from your partner, your kids, your friends, even from yourself, despite telling yourself you're fine. Yet this internalizing can leave you carrying the weight of the world on your broad shoulders. So if you find yourself bottling your emotions in this way, this episode is for you. We're going to be breaking down why suppressing your feelings can lead to more stress, more conflict, and certainly harm your mental health. We'll talk about how opening up does not make you weak. It makes you more present and more connected. So let's unpack this together. Welcome to Man Talk, a podcast of real conversations about life, your life, our life, and the emotional well-being of men. My name is Todd-Collins. I'm the Director of Men and Relationships Counseling. Thank you for being here. Sit back and relax and join me as we unpack this bottling part of yourself in this latest episode of Man Talk. Hello, dear listener, wherever you are. I hope all is going well in your world. I am going okay. I'm sitting on a Sunday morning with the sun shining brightly through the window, even though it's cold. We're getting into winter and, well, we're still in autumn. So the autumnal wind and leaves keep falling around me. And this particular topic that I'm going to be talking to you about today is a topic that's close to my own heart. It's partly to do with the fact that most men I work with talk about bottling of emotion, but it's also a pattern that I grew up with. This kind of idea that we don't talk much about what we're feeling or thinking, particularly when it's more negative related or more, emotional health related. And I began to learn a lot in my own personal life, but also, of course, in my career of how to change this pattern within myself, but also with other men that I work with. What is it about emotional bottling? How does it tend to show up in you? What are you aware of in yourself? Suppressing or denying or ignoring your feelings as opposed to expressing them is part of this emotional bottling. Now, what it tends to look like for people, and this may be something that resonates for you, not all of it, but maybe some of it. But when it shows up, it's things like when you're staying silent when you're upset, when you're kind of brushing off arguments or comments or conflict that are going on in your life with friends or with your partner, or if you're just avoiding conversations about how you're feeling altogether. Or your mood is changing. You may be aware that you get a bit more irritable and you're more snappy at the people you care about, your partner, your kids, your friends, your family, and so on. Or you may find yourself withdrawing or just feeling numb. And for some blokes, physical symptoms tend to show up a bit more. You're more tired, more headaches, more tension in your body. So these are the patterns that we learn about, which we'll go into shortly. It's a self-protective pattern. It's where your body or your mind or your nervous system is responding to the feelings of threat in some way, usually perceived or otherwise. The problem, of course, you will know this, is that emotions that are being bottled tend not to go away. What happens is they linger beneath the surface. They will affect your mood and your mental health and the patterns in your relationship. So if you find yourself getting lost in these patterns, it can feel a bit like a lemonade bottle that's sort of pressure building up over time. And if you're shaking it, eventually it begins to spill. And the worst of it, of course, it begins to explode. So let me share with you some real life examples of how this tends to show up in men that I've met. The next couple of sections or segments are really about just giving you some ideas of where some of these internalized thoughts and experiences that many blokes have often share with me when I'm doing my consultation work, but also they're designed to get you to think about where you are in the way you internalize your thoughts and your feelings. These are really common experiences that blokes go through. I want you to think about which ones resonate the most with you, and we'll get to talking a bit more about what you can do about this as the episode unfolds. But there are a number of really common examples of internalized thoughts and belief systems that end up being bottled or being internalized in a lot of men's minds. So there's two segments to this. There's quite a bit of stuff to think about. So I do want you to pay attention, but also be mindful of the fact that I'm not intending to box you into a particular category. These are just really, really consistent themes that show up all the time. Now, if you're the kind of bloke that works very hard, I've got these kind of men that come in and talk to me who are the overworkers. They are the overworked provider. These are the guys that are thinking, I'm doing this for us, for the family, for their partner, and so on. So if you end up finding yourself working late hours or long days and you're missing dinner with your family and your partner's saying, why are you always working so much? And you tend to respond with the frustration. I'm doing it for us. Can you not see why and how I'm working so hard? But deep down, you start to feel unappreciated and exhausted, but you're not sharing that. You're just doubling down on the work you're doing in your work life, your career, your business, or whatever you're doing day to day. And then there's the guys that will say, I don't have time for this kind of argument or blow up. Now, this is a common one for men with kids, particularly. Kids are very good at triggering all sorts of things in parents. If you've got a kid who spills something and your partner says, can you just help out with this, please? And you snap and you say, I'm just too busy. I haven't got the time right now. And you start to feel the guilt for overreacting, but you tell yourself, well, they don't understand how much pressure I'm under. And then you have the silent commuter. This is the guy who is maybe driving home from work or even on a train or a tube or even a plane. And you start to feel the weight of the day pressing down on you. And you start to think to yourself, I'm so exhausted, but I can't stop. They are counting on me. So instead of looking forward to going home, you kind of dread the possibility of more demands, more conversations about, I don't know, how busy you are or how distant you've been. And then there's the mask that men wear, which says, I'm fine. Your partner notices that you're stressed out and maybe they ask you, are you okay? And you'll just brush it off. I'm fine, just a lot going on at work. You don't want to burden them with your struggles, so you keep it inside. And then there's the guy that says, I'll fix it myself. This is the classic one, particularly when or if you're asked to fix something that's broken at home. And normally, you know how to do it, right? You'll dive into fixing something. It could be a broken chair, a broken lock, a broken window. It could be anything that needs a fairly, relatively straightforward fix. But you find yourself just reacting, right? You're already tired and exhausted. And when your partner suggests something like this, you say, okay, I don't need help. She's saying, go and get help, get a professional to come in or a tradie. You say, I don't need help. I'll do it on my own. Leave it to me. But you're reacting to this. You're actually frustrated with it. So these are a number of really common kind of domestic examples. And there are a few more real-life scenarios that are internalized in blokes. This is getting into the mind of men and maybe your mind as well. You know, one of the challenging parts of this kind of segment or section of the podcast that I'm talking about is there are so many different versions of emotional bottling, different kind of thoughts, different kind of feelings that are often internalized. But here's a few more for you to consider. Have you ever had the thought, why can't they see that I'm struggling? I don't know when this comes up in your mind. It can happen often late at night. Maybe you're in bed thinking, or maybe you're working towards the end of a working day and you're thinking that you're exhausted and you're drained and you're thinking to yourself, why does anyone not notice how hard I'm working? Why don't they appreciate what I'm doing for them? But you don't say anything about it. You just keep going, hoping that your actions will speak for themselves. Hello. I'm sorry for interrupting this episode. I'm just dropping by, firstly, to ask you a question. What do you think the most common complaint most men and women make about their relationship? Well, it's communication problems. You thought I was going to say sex, didn't you? Well, that is actually a close second. But so many men in particular complain that they get tongue-tied and twisted when trying to communicate or open up with their partner, and often they end up shutting down or just saying the wrong things. So what is good communication in a relationship, I hear you ask? I'm so glad that you did. Well, I've actually created a free guide, Better Conversations for Blokes. It's a quick and easy guide to improving communication in your relationship. It's got heaps of tips and tricks and skills and actual phrases that you can use right now. It's made just for you. You can get the free guide in the show notes. Finish the episode and check out the show notes and find a way of improving your communication with your partner right now. Well, there's the thought that I'm not good enough. This is a kind of spiraling thought that many blokes have. After a long day, you come home to your partner, maybe the house is messy, or your partner seems upset about something, and you think to yourself, I'm just working so hard, and it's still not enough. What more can I do? But you won't talk about this, of course. You may withdraw into those thoughts, feeling like you're failing in some way as a partner or as a provider. The classic one that many blokes have is that I am the rock, that you may see yourself as the one who holds everything together. When when it feels like things are falling apart around you, but you think, I can't let them see me struggle. I need to stay strong for them. And this is the belief that stops you from opening up, even when you're at your breaking point. Or the classic one, how are you? Is everything okay? You've been a bit quiet, and you'll say, well, I'm just tired. And you do feel tired. You feel the tension, but you don't know quite exactly how to explain what's going on, so you shrug it off. Yeah, I'm fine, just tired from work. But there are other thoughts there deep down that you're not feeling quite adequate, or you're not sure about how to fix some stuff. And so it feels easier to avoid the conversation. And then there's the classic distractions, the phone escape. You're sitting on the couch with your partner, you're not engaging particularly well, you're scrolling on your phone, and they are trying to talk to you. But you're responding with things like, yeah, good, sounds good. So you're physically there, but emotionally you're kind of checked out. And you're using your phone as a way to avoid addressing any of the issues that are going on in the relationship or even just within you. And this can happen with the TV or the phone or the laptop. Now, a big internalized struggle for many blokes is, I don't know what to say. The silence of that is, I don't know what to even say or even know where to start. Even if your partner's bringing up any kind of issues that are going on in their life or in the relationship, and you're not sure because, you feel the fear and some of the inadequacy of not knowing how to respond. So you sit in silence, not sure what to say. In your head, you're thinking, I'm just going to say the wrong thing. Or what happens if I make it worse? So you don't say anything. And of course, you hope the moment will pass. And this internal battle within all these kind of emotional bottling experiences is a really big deal. If you're lying in bed next to your partner, replaying arguments or imagining worst case scenarios in your head, and you're questioning your relationship or you're questioning yourself. What if they are not happy with me anymore? What if I'm not good enough? But you won't share those feelings or those fears, and you end up bottling them all completely. Now, why do all these things matter? Essentially because, the more you're bottling, it affects the way you feel about yourself and the world that you're in. It impacts your mental health and your physical well-being. So we know that suppression creates the barrier to intimacy, to trust, and to the connection with the people you love. So I want you to begin to recognize and start to address any of these patterns that are much more about emotional bottling. I want you to start to identify them as a first step towards emotional health and well-being. It's so important because it's so common in blokes to do this because we are kind of naturally in some way wired to be much more internal in our emotional lives. But, to make sense of this a bit more, there are some reasons why this is happening. So let's spend a bit of time thinking about what are the reasons that you end up bottling. It's partly to do with what we call meta-emotion and also historical trauma in relationships and life that kind of shape the way you deal with your thoughts and your feelings. Now, meta-emotion is basically how you feel about your feelings. Now, there's a whole episode on meta-emotion in the archives of the Man Talk podcast. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's worth going back to have a listen to that. This is basically where you have been raised in your own life and the messages you've picked up about certain kinds of emotions or feelings, right? So feelings like sadness or fear or vulnerability can be judged as being bad or weak. This is a belief system that you may have grown up with in some form. So it makes it very hard to deal with emotions in a healthy way because it's part of the way blokes bottle them up. So if you have a meta-emotion response to something like a feeling, you're saying to yourself, well, I don't want the feeling or I'm going to judge the feeling. So for example, if you've been taught that showing emotions makes you less of a man, you're more likely to feel more ashamed or shame or embarrassment when the feelings come up. So you push them down instead. Or you may fear of what people think of you if you're feeling something like a negative emotion. You're worried about seeing yourself as weak or incapable. It's also where this tough guy mindset comes from. It's the man up thing. It's the stay strong no matter what. And this mindset will make it feel like showing emotions is some kind of failure. Another reason why men bottle it up and push them down. And some blokes over time, because they're so used at bottling emotions over time, it becomes a habit. And they stop recognizing what they're feeling completely, so all their emotions are ignored. Now, trauma is another part of the influence in emotional bottling. Trauma is any kind of deeply distressing or overwhelming experience that you may have had that leaves a lasting emotional impact. It can come from all sorts of events of your life, from a tough childhood or an abuse background, or a painful breakup, or being in the middle of your parents breaking up, or losing someone you love, or a health issue for yourself or someone you care about, or a loss of a job, or just overall feeling like you're unsupported during the most difficult times of your life. Now, for many blokes, trauma can feel like a real heavy weight, often that they carry silently. And it leads to feelings of anger and shame and numbness. It's not just about what would have happened to you, it's also most significantly about how it made you feel and how it still affects your thoughts, emotions, and relationships today. Now, as we go through this segment, I want to encourage you to think about something. If there are themes or issues that are now coming up for you through this episode that you recognized or you're recognizing that are unresolved in you, and you've not sought out help, I would encourage you to think about what it is that you need. Maybe counseling or therapy, or a combination of that, talking to your GP or talking to someone you trust, that you're aware enough to know that there's some unresolved or unfinished parts of your life that you know are affecting the way you deal with your feelings today or the way you're dealing with your relationship today. There is a significant link between trauma and emotional bottling in men. If you're in Australia or in Melbourne or local to me and you want to check in and book an appointment, all the details are on or in the show notes. If you're elsewhere, seek out what kind of counseling or therapy is there for you to start to deal with some of these emotions or feelings or experiences that you've not spoken about before. So this next segment begins to look at the link between trauma and emotional bottling in men. How have you coped with tough or painful experiences you've had in your life? How do you cope with times that are overwhelming? Some blokes often feel like emotions such as fear or shame or anxiety or sadness are feelings that they don't want to have, and they try and push them down or ignore them. This is part of what bottling up emotions is all about. Now, if you remember, trauma is anything that has had a deeply distressing or overwhelming impact on your life. It's left a lasting psychological, emotional blueprint. It's common to feel like emotions in this sense are too much to handle, and to some degree, emotional bottling is the best way to cope. Many blokes tend to avoid talking about their feelings because they're worried about how they're going to be perceived, but also they're not always sure how they identify their emotional experiences anyway. And this other pressure that comes with it is the belief system that we should be strong and not vulnerable. We should man up in a way. So this combination of experiences impacts even more the trigger to emotionally shut down. If you tend to avoid your feelings altogether, this can lead to those feelings of being numb. It can feel like you're just going through the motions of life without really feeling anything. One of the impacts or the relationship between traumatic events and emotional shutdown is the struggle to regulate what it is you are feeling. So if you think about your own life, whether you've had childhood experiences that have been difficult, relationship breakups, or your parents' divorce, or career changes, or major health issues, or any significant life events, all of which can disrupt your ability to process and express yourself. What's most important here is to know that when any feelings or emotions are not processed, they can just become overwhelming. The other link between trauma and emotional bottling is what we call internalized negative patterns. These are those negative thoughts that you have about yourself, mainly. Self-criticism is part of it, that inner critic, or the fear of being judged, or even that kind of experience that there's something wrong with you or you feel inadequate. These are patterns that make it very difficult to open up. And so emotional bottling is the best way to cope. What's most important here is how we break this particular cycle. Addressing emotional bottling requires self-awareness and a willingness to confront your own emotional experiences. And using tools or finding tools like increasing your emotional intelligence, going into therapy or counseling, or going into communication skills workshops or personal development courses will help you to process your own experience of your own life, including trauma, and finding better ways or healthier ways to express yourself. Now, whilst suppressing or bottling is a defense mechanism, we also know how it deeply impacts mental health. It often leaves blokes in a cycle of stress. Now, we know from the research that blokes who bottle up their feelings are more likely to experience more anxiety, more depression, and even physical health issues like high blood pressure or heart disease. There can be a kind of ripple effect that can lead to cycles of stress. And this includes a diminished sense of self, like your self-esteem, but also a significant experience of isolation, which we'll look at in a moment. So bottling of emotion creates a kind of feedback loop, and you may recognize some of this in yourself. This is how it often plays out. If you're suppressing your feelings, whatever they are, frustration, sadness, fear, anxiety, worry, and you feel like you should be staying strong, and you have an internalized belief that you should be avoiding burdening other people, this will start to build up. And it will include noticing any kind of physical and mental strain that goes with it. Unprocessed emotions manifest itself often physically, headaches, muscle tension, or struggling to sleep well. This kind of added strain also includes things like, a very busy mind, overthinking, or over-anticipating, the anxious mind, right? And at the same time, you may start to see how your reactivity is increasing. So if stress is building up to a point where even the most mundane or minor inconveniences are triggering you, or they're triggering disproportionate responses like snapping your partner or even being grumpy and irritable with people at work. And then you can lead into avoidance behaviors where you may just turn to distractions like overworking or excessive screen time, and at the extreme, more alcohol or more substance use, all of which are delaying addressing any kind of root causes of what's happening in your stress. And this reinforcement behavior includes things like avoidance, but also the temporary relief of the avoidance, where you're just distracted and you feel better. Problem is that ultimately it leads to more stress because whatever's being unresolved in you keeps piling up or keeps coming back. Now, this cycle of stress or de-stress has such an impact on the way a lot of men feel about themselves. I'm not sure about you, but if you're holding back and withholding all your feelings and pushing them down or suppressing them, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy or self-criticism, and therefore a cycle of avoiding being vulnerable, opening up and talking about what's happening for you and reinforcing some of these negative beliefs, all of which lead a lot of blokes into this isolation of experience. One of the most damaging impacts of emotional bottling is the feeling of being alone. And a lot of men feel this way. They kind of pull away from people. They disconnect from the people they love. They struggle to seek out support, even with their partners. They won't talk about stuff. And there's a kind of reinforcement of that experience of being lonely. Now, as you're listening to this, I want you to be considering or reflecting on your own experience of emotional bottling and your own experience of any kind of cycle of stress that you're getting locked into or you're getting lost in your own mind. And I want you to consider what kind of help you may need. You may already be talking about this with somebody else, either a counselor or a therapist, or you are talking about this with your partner. But if you're not, and you're withholding, and you're just carrying it too much on your own, I want to encourage you to reach out to anybody in your area, whether it be a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor, or even just with your partner, and start talking about what you're learning about in terms of the influence or the impact of emotional bottling. If you are in Australia and you want to do some work on this, the information around checking in with me or booking a session with me is in the show notes. So please reach out. So not only does this impact your own mental health and well-being, the emotional bottling experience also has a significant way of shaping your relationship with your partner. As you've no doubt recognized through this particular episode, suppressing your feelings, bottling your emotions creates all kind of barriers, right? Barriers for yourself, but also barriers between you potentially and the people you love, including your partner. Now, this kind of emotional bottling essentially means you end up shutting down. On the outside of this is where partners often make assumptions that you don't care, or you have no empathy, or you're just not interested, which of course in the relational sense leads to more misunderstandings and conflict, right? Bottling emotions makes it very hard to resolve your own issues, let alone any issues going on in your life with your partner or in your life in your family. So if you're addressing issues more head on, you'll avoid those kind of build-up of resentment over time. And this is where the kind of erosion of trust and intimacy is really important because, if you're more likely to be shut down or withdrawn when things are not going well, it's more likely, and this is my experience of working with men and women, that often women are very attuned to this. They often will say that they will notice their partner and their changes in their behavior. They will notice the distance and the disconnection. They may often feel like they're walking on eggshells, not quite sure how to approach you. Now, the good news around this, of course, is if you are learning more about your emotional expression, you can then build better connections with the people you care about, because essentially that kind of communicating will only strengthen your relationship. Bottling emotions is a really common and harmful pattern that does show up in relationship therapy and couples counseling. It's mainly because that when these feelings are suppressed, they just don't disappear. They end up manifesting in certain patterns or behaviors, things like distance and conflict and disconnection. And for men in particular, this is really important because the idea of getting better connected with your partner is about increasing your emotional intimacy, your capacity to hear but also express feelings. So these common relational struggles like withdrawing and disconnecting are part of the problem. Or noticing if your mood is becoming more irritable, it can create more conflict in your relationship with people you love. If you're avoiding difficult conversations, that withdrawing also creates patterns of conflict and resentment and emotional distance. If you're internalizing your stress and not talking enough, partners tend to assume there is something wrong with them. But if you're experiencing more physical experiences like not sleeping properly or having headaches, for example, this will place more strain on your relationship with the people that you're caring about if you're becoming less present and therefore less engaged. The good news is, there is always opportunities, there's always a way of changing these patterns. So let me give you some simple, practical steps just as a way to start. Now, here are some practical tips to help you to, start to express some of your emotional experiences. Now, there are 6 steps here. In fact, there are 5 plus one more. The first step is, depending on how busy you are, we need you to make some space and time to start to reflect. Now, that means that you have to have no distractions for approximately 5 to 10 minutes a day, or 5 to 10 minutes every second day. Most blokes say to me, I'm just really busy. And when they're not busy, they're on the phone or they're watching something on television or they're on the laptop or they're at the gym or they're riding a bike or they're going for a run. They're all really fine and important things. This is a bit different. You need to build some self-reflection into your routine. And that is literally 5 to 10 minutes a day or every second day. That's the first thing you have to do. So what do you do with that time? I want you to make a moment or create a moment where you check in with yourself and ask yourself these questions. What am I feeling right now? And what is happening that makes me feel this way? And what do I need? The 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? What is happening that makes me feel this way? And what do I need? And I want you to be writing this down. That's the third step. Now, you can do this in your head and not write anything down. Depending on how busy your mind is and what you do with your thoughts, those kind of self-reflective questions, what am I feeling right now? How do I know, or what's happening that makes me feel that way? And what do I need? Can just get lost in the busyness of your own mind. And you may well just think, well, what's the point? I've got better things to do. If you're writing it down, you're starting to pay some more attention to how you process your own feelings and maybe get some more clarity. So the first step is space and time to reflect, 5 or 10 minutes, ideally every day or every second day. Second step is those feelings, the question, what am I feeling right now? What is happening that makes me feel this way? And what do I need? Those are the 3 questions in the second step. Third step is to write them down. Start journaling them. You can put it in your phone if you want, or you can write them down on a piece of paper or in a diary or a journal. And the fourth step is that I want you to start small, but I want you to start sharing some of your feelings with someone you trust. Now, ideally, your partner. if not a really good friend. And you can start sharing some of your feelings of the day or the week that you've had, because there is some value in you starting to talk more. Start small. You can start with the frustrations of your day. The fifth step, when you start to engage with somebody and sharing what you're feeling, they will start to respond back to you and share their feelings with you about their experience of their day or their life or their week. And if they are talking to you about their own emotions, you need to start to practice active listening. You need to start to listen with empathy and encourage that kind of mutual openness and sharing of a conversation. That is the fifth step. Those are the 5 steps that will begin to help you start to identify your feelings, share them, practice the idea of communicating them, but also learning to listen and to understand with empathy. And that will begin to enhance your communication, but also your intimate engagement with someone you care about, including a friend, but also particularly your partner. The 6th step is, if you're getting into trouble with this, if this is really hard, or there are so many blocks going on that you're bottling up and you're finding it really tough, go and seek some support. If you're going to talk to somebody professionally, like a counselor or a therapist, or you may join a men's group, or you may start to do a personal development program, and I'll tell you more about the program I'm offering shortly. It will help you to begin the conversation with someone by just thinking or saying, I'm getting stuck. I want to be more expressive. I'm bottling my feelings. I'm not quite sure what they are. I'm getting in my own way. That is the first place to start. Try and remember what you're doing here is beginning to understand that expressing your feelings is not a sign of weakness. It's a way of building strength. And if you start taking some steps, you're not only improving your own well-being, but you're also potentially creating a deeper, more connected relationship with the people around you. Now, as always, we've covered a lot of ground in this episode. Now, for most of you, or those of you who have been following me for a while, you will know that my passion is really about guiding blokes to understand their emotional health and their relationship skills. And healthy communication is very much part of this, which is why I've created a mini course. It's called From Shutdown to Communication: 4 Relationship Boosting Strategies for Men. Now, it's for men maybe like you who want to communicate with more openness, more clarity, and more confidence, including understand how to change this experience or pattern of emotional bottling. It's designed for men who want to increase emotional intimacy and break through some of these negative patterns that we've been talking about today. And of course, it's for blokes who want a happier, more secure relationship and to be more in tune with yourself. Now, the course has 2 lessons. The first lesson is called Navigating Distractions. It is the skills of being more present and aware in your relationship. And lesson 2 is called Communicating with Confidence. It's a step-by-step guide to connect and engage with your partner. Now, these relationship skills are the same strategies that are used in my relationship therapy and my individual consultations. They take somewhere between 6 to 8 sessions just to begin any real progress. In therapy or in counseling, that's an investment of around about $1,500 or more. Now, I know that you want to see some changes in this when it comes to your own well-being and maybe your relationship. So this program at the moment, the mini course, is only now available at $49 at this time. So if you're ready to start doing some work on yourself, the information about the course is on a link in the show notes that'll take you to more information about the program itself, but also how you can check out and sign up for the course itself. Now, if this episode does spark more interest in your own personal development, there is also a booking button in the show notes about how you can work with me one-on-one. big thank you for listening. If you do like what you hear, please tell your mates. Give me a review wherever you found the podcast. That really helps. And I'll catch you again in the next episode of Men Talk.